Welcome to Changes. This is a Google Plus Hangout, also simulcast on YouTube and archived there, or maybe you're watching from Twitter and embedded on your YouTube phone link. However you're watching, welcome. I'm Sally Ember, Edd, and I am the host of Changes. This is a conversation between authors on a variety of topics that we keep rated PG, but that really goes very far afield sometimes. Very exciting, always live, always interesting. And today's guest is Devorah, sometimes known as D. Fox. Welcome, D.
Well, good morning. I'm glad to be here, especially since I was told just a day or two ago that writers are different. And so it's good to be able to spend an hour talking with another writer, and I won't feel quite so different.
Wow, so it sounds like somebody gave you that not quite as a compliment.
Well, it was like, it wasn't quite a compliment. It was a borderline complaint, I think.
What do you think they were referring to in particular? What was different about you in their opinion?
That when we writers get together, the things that we talk about, what we get jazzed about, are not typical. So, and we do. I mean, we'll just go on and on and on. We'll all be talking 60 miles an hour, and if you're not, if you're not in the club, it's alienating, I guess.
So we're talking about book covers or social media promotions or word counts or chapter problems, plot and character issues, world building, fantasy realms.
All of the above, yeah.
Well, I think those are the conversations I want to be having.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be different, and I'm really happy to have you on the show so we can talk about whatever we want, and there's nobody else invited to tell us if we're going to be too different for them. So poo on them is what I say. So tell us about the kind of writing you're the most excited about right now, because that's what I always like to hear about with my guests, is what's got you jazzed this week.
Something new that I am trying not to get into because it's going to pull me off my current path. I have so many projects that are already not done, and I'm trying to stay on track with them, but I have just recently started watching a series called Warehouse 13.
I watched all of that. Oh my God, you're new to it?
I am so jazzed. I want to write Warehouse 13 stories. I've got about 25, 30 Warehouse 13 type stories. I just love the whole concept of the possessed artifact.
Well, there's another similar show that's developed from a series of movies called The Librarian. That's now called The Librarians. Are you watching that too?
Yes, yeah, and I liked the feature films better. Maybe they haven't quite found the TV series hasn't quite found its groove. I really like the little math geek girl in the show. She's an inspiration. And I like the cowboy who has all the artistic sensibilities, and I like what they could have made him, cast him as use an actress for that role and made the math whiz a male. I think that would have been more typical, but they're playing against type, and it works, and I think it's wonderful to inspire people who have been curious about those disciplines, but thinking, oh no, guys don't get into this, or no, women don't get into this. Well, now they have wonderful models, and I think that's a great thing. But yeah, I'm kind of waiting for that show to really find its feet, and I don't know that it has yet.
Well, you bring up a really good point, which is how writers, whether we're writing books, TV, film, short stories, columns, novellas and novelettes and whatever else we want to write, we are setting up for our readers opportunities and options that they might not have considered. By the way we depict our scenery, our characters, our plot points, everything about what we create for our world building. We're giving them additions to their imagination, and I personally feel very responsible about that because I like to write utopian and forward-thinking, futuristic, positive stories. I know lots of people do the opposite, but for similar reasons, is that we're trying to write ourselves out of a problem.
Uh, I I I agree. I actually started a number of the writing projects that I'm still doing now. Started them because I was trying to write myself out of something. I started writing the newspaper, the Discovery's newspaper column, to work myself out of executive burnout. I started the King v. William literary fantasy series because basically I was trying to write myself out of a heartbreak. So yeah, I think looking back on that, you would then say, well, writing is therapeutic for me, and it is. I do tend to escape into my writing, but I see also that it has opened up worlds for people. They have told me that it opened up worlds for them, which is so exciting and probably the only encouragement I need to keep going.
Well, it is exciting, and before we get too far afield into some other wonderful topics, I want to let people know that you are a published author of a fantasy series, and you have been so kind as to put all of your links up on the event page that I put on that you sent me. So there's some of them right there. Your main website is Devorah Fox, DevorahFox.com, and we're going to look at that in a few minutes. And then I also wanted to note that you are on Amazon, you are on Smashwords, your books are available in both places, and people can find them there. Now, do you have anything that is low priced or free, or is everything a moderate price? How do you do your pricing?
I've looked at what other people are charging for books of the same length and type, and that seems to be what everybody's charging. My latest one, the book 3 in the King v. William series, is right now it's only on paperback and Kindle. It's in the Kindle Select. So that one's not on Smashwords or anywhere else. But since it's in Kindle Select, for those who are have Kindle Unlimited, it's free to Kindle Unlimited people.
Okay, so that's an option for people. And so when you're creating the King v. William fantasy world, and you said you were trying to write yourself out of a heartbreak, I can totally relate to that because part of the way that I set up my Spanner series novel timeline overlap and keeps changing what's happening with the main character and is she with or is she not with her romantic interest, Epifanio, is that I am not being able to be with the man that I would like to be with because his feelings don't reciprocate mine. And so I've created a character that's a lot like me in this whole series, that's Clara, and a character that's a lot like this man, but he's also a composite of other people and also someone I just made up. But they're on again, off again, will they, won't they, can they, can't they, how many timelines are they together, how many are they not, was my way of being therapeutic with myself and wanting to be able to get myself into something I do want and out of something I don't want. So is that what you were doing too?
A little bit, but more, I had a different motivation that was much more compelling. The writing was a little bit therapeutic for me, but what I was really setting out to do in a very deliberate way was I firmly believed that when we write, and I still believe this, when we write, we take the imagined and we bring it into reality. You know that characters that you have read in books have become as real to you as if they were living, breathing people that you could walk down the block and have a cup of coffee with. I mean, they now have a life, and I really do feel that when we write, we take the imagined and we make it real. So I had a friend who had been through really traumatic episode, career displacement, divorce, all at once. And I wanted to see if I could imagine a happy ending for that. Imagine that working out, and then I would write that and make that real and bring a potential resolution into this plane. That was why I started writing that story.
Wow. Well, I want to interrupt you for a minute to bring in your neighbor, John Howell, who literally lives right down the street from you. He has been a previous guest on my show. Hi, John. Thanks for coming. And he says he likes the concept of writing ourselves out of situations, but he wants to know if we have any comments about writing ourselves into situations. And you must have read his mind, because that's what you talked about.
I don't know that. I'd have to think if I've ever written myself into a situation. But
well, you wrote your friend into a situation that you wanted her to have.
Oh, yeah. And this is actually trying to bring this happy ending, make this happy ending happen. I'm on book 4 now. This is not turning out to be as easy as I thought. I keep thinking, move through the story, and I keep thinking, okay, yeah, we're about to get to happily ever after, and then I get something like about 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through the particular book, and I go, nope, no way this is ending happily ever after. So I'm going to have to do another book. So.
Well, you bring up another point that I found that really surprised me as a science fiction writer. Before this, I was mostly writing shorter pieces or nonfiction, and science fiction novels are new to me. Novel-length fiction is new to me as of about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, my first publication. And I showed it to people, my friends, my family, and they were giving me comments, some of my beta readers. And I kept getting these comments about this male character, the character that I thought was this romantic interest for Clara, as I said, who was based on this man that I was really in love with. And I was getting all these negative comments. Like, one person even said to me, why do you hate this man so much? Why are you so angry at this man? Why do you make him so unlikable? Well, he's really a jerk. And I was so shocked, because I thought I was creating this romantic lead that everybody would see why Clara loved him and feel sad that she couldn't be with him. And meanwhile, I guess all of my unresolved resentment had surfaced, and I created this character who really was complicated, but also not exactly a Prince Charming, if you know what I mean. And that was so interesting. So now I'm in volume 3. I have to bring in some other love interests for her, because maybe she won't be with him anyway. But even if she could, maybe she wouldn't want to.
Well, I think also what happens when we're writing, at least it does for me, and I'm actually very happy when this happens, is at a certain point the characters take over.
Yeah.
I may have started the story thinking I knew who this person was and what was going to happen, but at a certain point the character said, oh, no, I'm taking the reins, I'm taking the story the rest of the way. And then it's just a matter of keeping up with the character and channeling that and getting that out and taking my hands off the wheel and let the characters drive the story. And that's what happened in the King B. Williams series. I thought I knew everything I needed to know about him, but I discover something new with each book, and that opens up new possibilities too. So,
well, because you're bringing up your series, I want to share your website with people and show them some things that they might not know about your writing, and give them a chance to encounter it on your website, which again is DEVORAHFOX, DevorahFox.com. And what we're showing them right now is not from the King B. Williams series. So tell us about Naked Came the Sharks that won a book trailer contest about a month ago.
I'm so sentimental about that book. It is a contemporary thriller. It's set in the present time, and it is set here in the Coastal Bend. It's a story that I collaborated on with 3 other people. About 15 years ago, actually, we started writing this. Just for fun. They were friends in writer group, they were friends in book club, and we all had our little writing projects, and we were all, it's a environmental activist type story at heart. We were all cheesed about something environmental that was going on in the area, and we started writing this book. And we wrote it and kind of got it finished. I mean, we had a finished first draft, and then we put it aside because we felt it was too controversial to ever see the light of day. And a number of years later, one of the authors passed away, and then a few years later, one of the other authors passed away. And I was sifting through files and found I had all the files because I was sort of the facilitator of the project in a very informal way. But so I had all the files, and I ran into all the files, and I started reading it again, and I went, oh my goodness, this is so good! You know, the writing in this is such a delight, and this I really need to share this. People really need, this is enjoyable. I really need to get this out there. So I contacted the last remaining author, and I said, what do you think? I want to do some editing on this. I want to beef it up a little bit, and then I want to get it out there. Is that okay with you? And she said, yeah, sure. So I did, and I had so much fun doing that. It was like being with those people all over again. I could hear them talking in the words in the book. It was just a delight to work on it, and I still found the story fun, and every time I see that book cover, I chuckle, and it's just a great experience. I am really glad that I had the opportunity to do it.
Well, that is really great. That is a great story, and thank you for sharing that. And I hope their families of the 2 people that have not gotten to see it come to publication are enjoying seeing it happen. And so then you also have your King William stories on here over on the right. You've got this King's Ransom, I think is what it says.
King's Redress. That's the latest one.
King's Redress, right? And you have 2 others in that series already published, and then you're about to have a 4th one, you said, sometime this year. You will.
Correct. I'm going to try to get it out this summer. So.
Okay, so there are many, many more parts to your website because of your column. And I wanted to bring that up, too, because you are a columnist for your local newspaper, and you go to events and restaurants and businesses, and you write them up, I guess, right?
Correct. We were talking earlier about writing as therapy, and I started the newspaper columnist as therapy for executive burnout. I had been doing a lot of technical writing for decades, and when I started the newspaper column, I actually hadn't started writing fiction, or at least not in a serious way. So I was looking, I got a chance to do a different type of writing, which is like this journalistic writing, and I grabbed the chance to refresh my creative self. And my goal at the time was, here in Port Aransas, it's a fairly small community. We have a lot of privately owned businesses, and they're all quirky and idiosyncratic because they also are expressions of their owners. A lot of the owners' personalities are in these businesses, and I wanted to share those businesses with a wider audience. And my question when I would go into these facilities was, some of them are very unusual for a small town. So it was like, okay, you know, why this boutique or why this restaurant here in Port Aransas of all places? And I loved the answers to the stories, and I wanted to share those stories. So that's how I started doing the newspaper column, and I then started the blog to republish those stories so that they would have a wider audience, because not everybody gets that paper. At the time, it was print only. It wasn't online. It is now, but So
Right, but that is such a great way to support local businesses and bring out their personal and professional, highlight their stories, let people know them as people. That's awesome.
and a lot of them are restaurants. I think we have something like 62 restaurants for what is a permanent population of something like about 3,300 people.
Oh my gosh.
And a lot of them are astounding restaurants, and so I'm not a formal restaurant critic, but the mystery of why this wonderful restaurant in this teeny little place wanted to know, and then I wanted to share how wonderful this facility was. So I actually do end up writing about restaurants a lot. So
Well, I just had this idea after I interviewed John and I found out I was going to have you on my show. John Howell and you are both authors of thrillers that are set, partly at least, in southern coastal Texas. And I had this idea that you should collaborate and have your characters meet each other, encounter each other in some bizarre and offhand way at one of these restaurants or one of those events.
that would be hilarious.
About, right? And it wouldn't have anything to do with the story, and it wouldn't even advance the plot. It would just be like an inside joke between you and John that almost nobody else would get, which is that you're neighbors, and so now your characters are neighbors.
Well, that would be hilarious. I'm actually working on a project. I'm collaborating on a project with another writer that is a spin-off of Naked Came the Sharks, because he was really charmed by the story. I ended up charmed by the story. I have some further adventures for the lead characters, Holly and Rusty. I fell in love with them, and I want to stay in touch with them, so I want to keep going. And Orville really liked it, so we are serializing a novel. I'm not sure this is the best idea I ever had, but we are publishing it as we are writing it, even though we have absolutely no idea where we're going with it. And it is set, again, it's kind of set in the same fictional, semi-fictional area, and references some of the characters from Naked Came the Sharks, although it's a whole different set of characters. But it's also an environmental thriller, so.
Well, there's a long tradition among writers of recycling our scenery and our characters and our settings so that, for example, the main character in one book might have a very minor character show up as the main character in another book, just to use the same setting. I know Debbie McAmer does that, if that's how you say her name, and lots of other people do that, where they'll invent a town, and then they'll invent a lot of characters to populate it, and in certain stories, certain ones are the lead characters, and the other ones are more in the background, or they're related to the lead characters, and then later it's the sister story, or the brothers, or whatever, or the parents. So I think it's a short way of setting up a whole world the way science fiction and fantasy writers do, and then using the same world over and over again, and just creating new stories and new character positions. So are you going to be doing that? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, the example I would give would be John Lesquat with his legal thrillers that are set in San Francisco. And he has a whole suite of stories. He's got the lawyers, he's got the law enforcement officials, he's got the investigator, he's got the reporter, and in one book or the other book, that's going to be the lead, and the story's it's either going to be a police procedural or it's going to be a legal thriller, but it's all the same cast of characters, and I think it's wonderful. I love his books.
Well, I think a lot of readers really like that. I know I, as a reader, really like that because it feels like you're revisiting somewhere you've already been, and you don't have to work quite as hard to know it, and you don't have to remember everything from the beginning because you already know some of it. And you remember from other stories if you're keeping up with these series, semi-series, whatever you call it. And so it's like picking up where somebody left off with a conversation with an old friend. And you get to find out more in the next, the sequel. So I like that a lot when people do that. And it's not the same as having a main character who's the main person in all the books. You know, like that's what I'm doing in my series. It's not really a series. It's really like what you said of having the setting and these interlocking stories with different ones being featured.
Well, I had that challenge when I was writing The King's Redress, and all three of the books have been from the perspective, from the viewpoint of King B. William. You see what's going on through his eyes. And I had a character pop up. I've actually come up in the second book. You'd think I'd remember my own books better, but, well, in any event, had a character pop up, a minor character, that I just absolutely fell in love with, and he has been lobbying me ever since for his own book. He wants to tell his story from his viewpoint, and when I finished the third book and I knew I was going to write a fourth book, I was trying to figure out how was I going to accommodate that. Could I switch in mid-series point of view? So could I tell the story from a pick up the same story but tell it from a different character's point of view? Or could I go from single character viewpoint to multiple character viewpoints? Could I do that? And I was kicking that around for a while and trying to figure out a way to make that work, and decided not to. The fourth book is still from King B. Williams' viewpoint. But Sir Maxwell still wants his own book. I'm going to have to accommodate that somehow because he's keeping me awake at night, nagging me about it. And it's almost a young adult or a new adult story, too, because he's so much younger. So that's on the to-do list.
But I think that is becoming a traditional way of encountering ourselves in a different genre or for a different audience. People will write novellas or a series of short stories, but they're based in the same world. And they have a lot of the same characters, but the point of view is different, or the purpose is different, or the time period they're talking about is different. Or what I think is really interesting, I love books like this, and mine are kind of like this because I love it so much, is you take the same events, but you tell it from each of the different perspectives that matter, or even from a minor character's perspective, because they're all going to tell it differently. They're all going to see it and feel things about it that aren't the same.
Oh, that's a good idea. I'll think about doing that in the fifth book, and there's going to be a fifth book, I already know. What I'm doing in this one, in the fourth book, in an attempt to capture the voices of the other characters, is there's a point in the story when this whole troop, the king and his knights and a bunch of civilians, go on a big road trip, 13th century style. I mean, it's basically a pilgrimage, although they're not, it's like a pilgrimage. You're not going to a religious site, but it's essentially a pilgrimage. And I stole a page from Chaucer's book. They're going to tell each other stories while they're on the road. So there are going to be these short stories within the novel, and each character will tell a short story. So they won't be biographical stories, so it's not the characters really talking about themselves, although they are, because, well, you know, we're essentially writing about ourselves when we write, but it will at least capture their voices and what's near and dear to their heart. And I've actually got about 5 or 6 or 8 of those written already, and I took one to one of the writer groups that I belong to earlier this month to run it past them to see if does the concept work, and they gave me a thumbs up. So yeah, I'm going with that.
That sounds really interesting. I think that a lot of readers are going to appreciate that, and I think it's really fun for the writers too, because you get to invite yourself to a different kind of storytelling, and it breaks up the seeming sameness that might even turn into monotony of the other way of writing. So you sort of open up your creativity in a different way when you do that. I have different chapters in my books that are completely different kinds of storytelling. So first I'll have just the main character just, you know, living her life and talking about it. Then I'll have her writing in her journal about it. Then I'll have her talking with another character about it. Then I'll have that character talking or writing about it. Then I'll have this whole other situation where she's giving a speech or there's a political meeting of some kind. Now my books involve aliens, and they're all on other planets most of the time, and they have a galactic council, intergalactic council. So I have some minutes from the meetings of those that are really just conversations printed out. of some of the decisions they had to make or arguments they were having that relate to Earth. So I have all these different historical and non-historical concepts being brought in that are, you know, somewhat real, but I, of course, invent things about Roswell or about other things that we know about but don't really understand. And I bring in things about Jesus or about Ian Fleming or whatever I feel like, you know, why not? I'm the writer. And so every chapter isn't even in the same format, much less having the same point of view, but my books are deliberately like that because I'm looking at the multiverse as an actuality. And how do we live in a multiverse with simultaneous time and multiple occurrences all at the same moment? Well, this is what a book like that would be. So mine isn't linear. Yours will be more linear, but then the stories could be anything, right?
And they are. I'm haven't finished your book one, the Spanners. I'm reading book one. I haven't finished it, but I did get to the explanation about Roswell. I thought I loved it, and Ian Fleming, and I thought I loved that. That was great, and the whole thing about the present tense. As you say, when you talk about it, yes, it takes some getting used to. I figured out why you were doing it, why that was important, why the story had to be told that way, and it does take some getting used to, but it does give a whole different feeling when reading it. It does make it dynamic in a way that stories told with pasts and presents and futures are not, if that makes any sense. I recently read another story, it was a beta read for somebody, and I commented that this reads as if I'm watching a TV show, not a film. It definitely had a TV show quality about it, and I think that's probably because it was all action and dialogue, very little exposition, very little scene setting. But I had a feeling that not so much that I was reading it, but that I was watching it being played out. So it was a physical sensation reading this because of the way it was written, and in a similar fashion when I'm reading Spanish, because it's all in the present tense, and it still startles me even as far into the book as I am, and I have to keep reminding myself, yes, this is all happening all at once, everywhere, in every dimension. So yes, of course, there's only one tense, but it took some getting used to.
Yeah, and it does really confound a lot of people. And if you don't read far enough into the first chapter for the explanation, you just think I don't understand grammar or that I don't know how to write, right? And I've had some people who haven't gone very far into it that have said, oh, this is terrible, you don't know what you're doing, and they don't know why I did it. And I thought a lot about putting something right up front, but I like starting where I started. I really like that as the beginning point of the story. And I've experimented with other parts with more exposition, and it's boring. And it doesn't really bring you in with the immediacy that bringing Clara right into the moment where she meets the aliens. That's important. Yeah. That is her beginning of that part of her story and what she wants to tell. So I think that's the way I'm doing it, is just something like you said, people either get used to it or they don't. And not everybody's going to like books like that, and that's okay. I'm not upset about that. I think that writers in general know that not everybody's going to like our books.
Oh, that's true. And then there are some books that the reader has to bring something to it. The reader has to participate, to buy into it for it to work. And not everybody wants to work that hard when they read. They just want it played out for them. They just want to be entertained. They don't want to get involved to that degree. And that's fine. That's why we have a lot of books. We have a lot of different kinds of readers. And yeah.
And you and I have also got some other things in common that I wanted to bring up because I found it fascinating that we've both been doing some Buddhist meditation. You said you involved yourself in a Zen retreat at one point.
Yeah, it's actually was a Zen mountain monastery. It's located actually not far from where my sister lives. And I had gotten curious about Zen and then went to visit her, and that was nearby, so I went for a Sunday service, and that was interesting. And I got on their mailing list and stayed kind of in touch with them, and they had a number of retreats or workshops or whatever you want to call them. I initially signed up for a writing workshop. I thought, taking a writing workshop at a Zen monastery would just be the ultimate experience, and it ended up getting canceled, but I had already paid for my plane tickets and made my plans, so they said, well, how about this other workshop instead? And okay, yeah, fine. And so I went, and I was there for a week. And I was...
Where is this? Is this in Sonoma County, California?
No, this is in New York. It's in Mount Trumper, New York.
Okay.
Mid-Hudson Valley. Just
sure.
Beautiful place, and it's really imbued with a lot of spirituality. There are convents and monasteries and retreat churches all over. It's just something about the setting, I guess. That
it's right near Woodstock.
Yeah, it's not far from Woodstock, yes. So I went for a week, and it was a dismal failure at all the meditation stuff and the silence. Even when you were a paying guest, you were supposed to participate by helping with chores, which, was fine. They wanted you to be part of the community, and that was a good way to be a part of the community, help do the work. So I ended up in the kitchen and just never did get the hang of trying to make a meal without talking and, getting instructions or asking questions. I mean, and the whole sitting meditation, of course, there's tons of sitting meditation all day and all night long, and I never, ever, ever, no matter how long I practiced, ever got good at sitting meditation. My legs fall asleep and my mind is wandering all over the place. And but I'm glad I went. I'm glad I had the experience.
I think you might have misunderstood the definition of successful. If you imagine that all these other people's legs aren't falling asleep, and their minds aren't wandering, you would be very, very incorrect.
Well, there are elements about being in the moment, about the process, not the destination. And I have never gotten the hang of that. I am not a process person. I'm not about getting there. I'm about being there. I mean, if I could beam myself to where I want to be, I would do it. I'm too impatient to really enjoy the process. I understand on an intellectual level that the process is important, but I'm too impatient to do it. And I had written a story for a magazine about an experience that I had at another retreat at the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies, which
in Rhinebeck, New York.
Oh yeah, that's my favorite spot on earth. I mean, when they tell you go to your happy place in your mind, that's where I go. I love that place. So I was taking a whole nother workshop. It might have even been a writing workshop, and I was charging up the hill to get to my little dorm room on a break. And at the Omega Institute, they had an awful lot of yoga and meditation and other kinds of workshops. So there were lots of monks of various types wandering around. And there was a monk coming down the hill at a much more reasonable pace, taking in every moment of his coming down the hill and having a whole different experience of this same path that I was on with him. And he gave me a look like, slow down, take it in, be in the moment. And I kind of went, yeah, right, but no, I got to get there. I've got 5 minutes, I want to do this, I want to get back. I went charging off and realized later that he was right. When else would I get a chance to do something like that? But I have never gotten the hang. Just not a process person. I am not about the getting there. I'm about the achieving the goal.
Well, I think you bring up a really important part of being human, Dee, and I don't think that almost anyone from this culture especially, but many other people around the world would have the same original questions, concerns, issues, dilemmas that you're describing when they enter any kind of spiritual practice, especially sitting or walking meditation. Nobody is an instant success. Nobody is an instant expert. Nobody feels comfortable right away or does all these things the way you're describing, in any kind of perfect way. Even after years and years and years of practice, the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama himself will say that he's still practicing. That's why we call it practice.
Yes. Yeah.
We don't call it getting there. We don't call it being perfect. We don't call it being an expert. We call it practice because that's what we're doing. We're getting better. We're learning. We're involving ourselves in new experiences, and they do change us over time. But a lot of the change I've encountered for my own practice is not something I would have predicted or that I did intentionally. It just happens. And I think that it happens the more you practice. And especially if you have more retreat time away from your regular life and you do that regularly, that is even valuable in a way that's different from a daily practice. And if you have a daily practice that's 10 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour away from your regular day, but then you also have another practice that's imbuing your day. Those are two different kinds of practices that are daily. And then some people have a dream practice, and some people have an eating practice, some people have a work practice. So there's a lot of different ways to involve yourself in the spiritual development. And if you did, I think over the course of whatever time it takes, you would look back and say, oh, I'm different now.
Mm-hmm.
But you wouldn't be able to point a finger and say because of that or this is when it happened, right? So you might just be a little too hard on yourself is the long way around of my trying to say that everybody's impatient. Everybody's a process or a goal person in opposition at various points.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really a matter of what else you're doing that creates opportunities for you to feel that spaciousness and how much of a habit you can make of it. That's what meditation does, is it gives us an opportunity to create new habits with our minds. It's really quite amazing what it can do. And I wouldn't give up if I were you. I would still do things even if they weren't a week long. I mean, that's pretty amazing that you just jumped in for a week long. I mean, some people go in, for a day or two.
Well, as I said, it was originally supposed to be a writing workshop, so we would have been busy for 5 days with that, and I had already committed to it, so I just stuck with it. But and I'm glad that I went. Have had better experiences with walking meditation, I have to say, and possibly that's because since I'm walking, I feel like I'm active and I can relax about the whole issue of getting there because, well, I'm walking, so eventually I'm going to get there. And then I can get off of that and relax into the moment. And in fact, it was a walking meditation that really got me on the whole Zen, interested in it, because I went to a short little introduction. This is actually a funny story. Maybe we have time for this. This was the weekend I was getting married, and I got married late in life. I was 46 when I got married. This was the weekend I was getting married, and it was I would put the wedding together myself, and it was we were getting married on Sunday, and on Friday my husband-to-be decided that I was kind of stressed out, and so he sent me to a spa for a spa day. And I was actually supposed to go with my sister, and she didn't want to go, so I went with my brother-in-law, which was just adorable. He loved it. One of the first things that you could choose to do for the spa day was go to aerobics, and it was being taught by a woman that I was taking aerobics from anyway, and so I was going to go ahead and take the aerobics class with Barbara. And Barbara said, no, 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 don't do that. You should go to the Introduction to Zen class. And oh, okay, well, Barbara never steered me wrong before, so I went ahead and did that. And that was my introduction. It was at a spa. And we did some sitting meditation, and I didn't really get it. And then she took us outside for walking meditation, and I did get into the moment in a way that I had never before. I really did slow down and open up and was introduced to how powerful that could be. And that got me interested in it, and I started to pursue that and try to develop a practice because it was just such a valuable experience. So,
that's fantastic. That is so great. I mean, people talk a lot about synchronicity and coincidence and serendipity and any kind of spiritual development. I think they're all involved. That you can just stumble into something or accidentally do something or have someone recommend it at the last minute, or like your writing workshop getting canceled, and then you end up somewhere you weren't necessarily planning to be.
Yeah.
It benefits you.
Yeah.
That happened to me this week, and I haven't even told anybody this, but I'll tell everyone now on my live show. I go to the gym 4 or 5 times a week. I usually swim with my mom, who walks 3 times a week, and then 2 or 3 other times I go. I guess I usually go 5 or 6 times, actually. I didn't do the math. And I do the machines, you know, and then a little bit of treadmill, and then I do a longer swim because she's not with me. And so I went on Monday after my new part-time job. I arrived there at a little bit of a different time. And I'm on this machine, and I hear this voice saying, hey, we're dancing in here. Come on in. Because there's an exercise room right next to the machine room where I go at the JCCA in St. Louis. And so I went in because it just sounded inviting, so I just wanted to see, like, well, what do they mean they're dancing in there, you know? And I have a bad leg, by the way, and about 7 or 8 months ago I had a very, very bad fall, broke my nose, concussion, hurt my arms, my hands, my back, my wrists, everything. So I'm still recovering from that, and so I have to be careful. So I look in and I see these women. It's all women, first of all, so that was a little bit more inviting to me. And they're all different sizes and ages and shapes, and they're just dancing. And I like the music, and it wasn't horribly loud, which I also hate. So I just sort of walked in, and then I just stayed. And I've never taken this class before. I didn't even know what it was. And it ended up being this whole spiritual dance movement class that I found out at the end is called NIA, N-I-A, which I've never heard of. But in the middle of it, you go through this whole experience. In the middle of it, the woman who was leading it had just lost her best friend to cancer. And so she was dancing her grief. And I've lost several friends to death in the last few years. And my own losses from my accident create a lot of grief. So I just am sobbing in the middle of this dance class, but still moving around. So are half the other women. And we just all keep moving. And then she brings us down to a quieter place, and then it ends. And then we leave, and I just sort of find out, oh, what's this called, and when does it happen? And I think, you know what? I'm going to come back to this. This was really good. And I could hold on to the bar, even though nobody else was. And I didn't have to do everything because I couldn't, but nobody said a word. And that's exactly what I needed. So, like you said, sometimes you go to something, and then something else pops up.
Well, it really just opened up a whole nother world for me. And I have fallen out of all my spiritual practices, but there have been a number of things that have happened just in the last few weeks that, you know, it's knocking on the door again saying, hey, remember me? Remember how swell that was? Maybe you should reconnect, you know, and so, yeah.
Well, one of my really good friends and loyal viewers, Rain Dow, one of my online buddies, is thanking me for telling that story and saying, that is so cool, Sally Ember, you're dancing. Well, and thank you, Rain, for visiting and making that comment. And what a lot of people don't know, because now I'm very large, is I used to be way smaller, and I used to be very athletic and a gymnast and a cheerleader and an athlete of other kinds, and over the years things have changed. So it was fun to go in there and dance again, even though I couldn't do all of it. In the middle of it, they started doing the can-can with the real can-can music, which was hilariously funny, and they were really doing a kick line, which I couldn't do, but I was next to them holding onto the bar and doing my little kicks. So I felt like I was part of it. And that brings us to, unfortunately, past the point that I usually stop us. It is past a quarter of the hour, Miss D. And so I'm going to ask you the question I asked all of our guests. But first I'm going to thank you for being here. And later, after you answer this question, we'll have a little moment for you to give yourself information about where to find you, give all the viewers all that information, and we'll end. So, given all of the local, personal, political, regional, spiritual, national, global, climactic, spiritual, regional, oh, I've already said all that, all the kinds of changes that you might be aware of, which ones really pique your interest and arouse in you hopes and fears? Which ones do you want to talk about? Take it away, Devorah Fox.
Well, it's funny you should ask me this today because I went to an event last night and got all cranked up again about environmental activism. It was, let me see if I can find the name of the film. Am I going to be able to find it?
There was a group meeting and there was a film showing and then a speaker?
Yeah, and it was a...
what was the topic?
That was a survey of environmental activism in about 5 or 6 acts, chapters or whatever in this film. The Sierra Club, the birth of the Sierra Club, and Greenpeace, and Love Canal, and the Amazon, and climactic change, and activist responses to those. And it got me, it reawakened the environmental activist in me. I had been involved in the activist movement in the 80s and have gotten busy. And then when I was working on Naked Came the Sharks with my friends, these environmental issues came back up, but then, as I said, we put the book aside and got busy with our lives again. And then I got a little interested in it again when I dug that book up and started working on it again. And then I went last night, and you know, this movie I was like, oh yeah, you know, I need to do something about that. And the book that I'm working on now, this one that we're serializing, is also got undertone of environmentalism. So I'm going to connect with my co-author and say, oh, we need to get serious about this. We need to get people involved in these issues. We need to bring these issues to the fore. And I like doing that. There are a number of ways, politics, legislation, that you can address, make social change. I like doing it through the arts because I think, yeah, that takes a long time and it's very subtle, but I think it does make a lasting change. You put somebody through an experience in your writing and they come out changed in a way that passing a law sometimes doesn't get that done, or at least not the same way. So, yeah, I'm all fired up about environmentalism now, and
that's fantastic. I mean, I think what you're talking about is the transformational function or purpose that many people put to their art. And I did theater that way for quite a while with young people and adults, where being in the piece would be transformational for each person, and we did meditation and visualization during our rehearsals, and creating the character was a real personal growth opportunity for each of the actors and actresses. And then we also had times with the audience where the audience would interact and be part of the show at different points, and that would be a transformational opportunity for them. And I think this advent of ebooks is giving yet another opportunity for readers, because you can give them live links, and you can give them opportunities to sign a survey or know about an event or go to a website and watch a little video or join a group or go to a meetup or whatever you want to put in your book.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not really exploiting all the potential of the ebook. Thanks for reminding me about that. Yes, that we can do that with the one we're working on now. Yes.
Exactly. And you can even go back and revise the first one to both have the same links at the
Yeah.
end. And
Yeah.
everybody who reads either one of them will get linked to each other, and it could really become quite a movement you create.
Yeah. 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 That's a great idea. Thank you.
I'm an activist. I've been an activist since I was 14. Actually, since I was 11. There's a lot of stories about being a feminist activist and then an environmental activist and an anti-war activist in my books and my stories, and we don't have time to get into all of those. But I think activism is something that needs to be constantly supported and reawakened. And that's what happened to you last night, is you got reinvigorated.
Yes, I did. I came out of there all fired up. I wish I could remember the name of the film. It had just come out in 2014, so it's a new film. Something about green fire. I guess if you Googled green fire, you'll find the
Well,
film.
if you think of it, put it up on the event page, put it up on your website, put it up on the YouTube page, and our viewers will find it. We're going to get a lot more viewers who watch this after we're not live anymore, and I want to thank you all for coming anytime you come to watch Changes. This is episode 18. I'm Sally Ember, EDD, and this is Devorah, sometimes known as D. Fox, coming to us from Texas, and I'm coming to you from Missouri, and wherever you all are coming from, thank you for coming. I want to remind you that you can reach Devorah on her website at devorahfox.com and also find her books on Amazon and Smashwords. And are you going to physically be doing any appearances in the near future, Dee?
Yes, actually, our Rockport Writers Group is going to have our fourth or fifth annual Rockport Writers Roundup next month, February the 28th. We haven't quite settled on the venue yet. It's probably going to be the Estelle Stair Gallery in Rockport. And a number of us in the group will be reading excerpts from our novels or short stories or poems, and people are invited to attend. So that will be the last Saturday in February.
Please put that information up on the YouTube page and on the event page and on your website so people can find it after the show is over and whenever they're watching it. And I want to remind people that I am not doing a Changes show next week. That's my Wednesday off for January. No show, January 21st. I will be welcoming a new guest, speaking of environmental change and activism, from Jazzy Echo, ECCO, and her name is Dr. Elizabeth Armstrong. And she is a fabulous speaker, activist, writer, and heart-centered environmentalist who's going to be bringing all of her experiences to bear and talking to me about everything she's doing and how we intersect on January 28th, 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time in the USA is our next episode of Changes. And before we go, I just want to thank you again, Dee, and remind everybody that you are a fantasy author and a columnist, and you have a lot of interesting pieces on your blog from your column, and that you're also a thriller writer and an environmentalist, and you're combining those two things. It's a pretty cool idea that I haven't heard that much about. And you're a neighbor of my other guest, John Howell, and I'm still going to put in a plug for your characters to meet up somewhere, so I'm going to keep doing that. I think it's funny. And I also want to remind people that I'm looking for guests for future episodes in March, April, and beyond. If you know any authors that would like this format and want to come on and talk with me about all kinds of things, we obviously are live and free-flowing, no script. The only thing I ask is that it's PG and that we at some point talk about writing, but we can talk about lots of other stuff. And I have really enjoyed this, Dee. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, this is very refreshing, and I'm coming away with inspiration and techniques and ideas and tools, so time very well spent. And I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to ask you more about your book, which I really am enjoying. I'm looking forward to I'm about halfway through, I guess, so I'm eager to keep on going.
Well, I appreciate you reading it at all, because lots of people read it and then they don't and then they do, and so thank you very much. I want to remind people also that I'm trying to turn my ebooks into print books. I'm also trying to get my next book cover funded. I'm also trying to get these video casts turned into podcasts, and a lot of this costs money that I don't have. So I have a campaign on a website called Patreon, patreon.com/Sally Ember. And you can donate as little as $4 and get a free ebook from me, or donate even more, lots of money. You could donate thousands of dollars if you so feel. And so anyone watching who feels moved, please go look at that. I have a video on there where I'm actually singing my Patreon campaign pledge and request, and I sneezed in the middle of it, and I left it in. I said, I'm not doing this over. And I also have something written if you'd rather read that rather than listen to me sing mediocre songs mediocrely. And there are other things on there as well about what I offer for rewards in the way of editing and proofreading and free books. So please go to patreon.com/Sally Ember and learn more about that. Please visit the changes page on my website, which is sallyember.com, SALLYEMBER.com. And you can see upcoming episodes and find the URLs and put yourself up as a guest if you email me at sallyember@yahoo.com. So say goodbye, Dee.
Goodbye. Thank you for joining us.
And thank you all very much for being on Changes. And as I say at the end of every episode, I hope you do well with your changes. Bye-bye.